Greetings, fellow Bible readers. Welcome to week 49 of our read through of the Bible. This week we get to finish up 1 Corinthians, head into 2 Corinthians, and also deal with two small but significant books of the Bible, Galatians and Ephesians. As we make that transition from 1 Corinthians to 2 Corinthians, you'll want to pay attention to, in 2 Corinthians, some of the same themes that came up in 1 Corinthians. Because both were written to the same congregation, Paul is still addressing some of the same issues, and in fact, some of the matters that he brought up to deal with in the first letter find resolution somewhat in the second letter. So be on the lookout for those things. Then as we move into Galatians, you'll notice that there's a little bit more intensity in Paul's tone because of the subject matter that he's dealing with. He's trying to defend a group of Christians and pull them back from a heresy and error about believing that people can be saved by something other than faith in Jesus that actually depends on human works. And so Paul gets a little bit animated about that. As a sidelight, if you're interested in delving more into the book of Galatians, Martin Luther's commentary on it is often considered a very classic and profound treatment of that book of the Bible. It is a little bit more in depth, but it's very worthwhile to check out. Then finally, we get the book of Ephesians, a letter that has as one of its key themes the matter of unity. So let's dive on into the readings for each day this week. On day 1, we get the last two chapters of 1 Corinthians, chapters 15 and 16. Chapter 15 is often called the Great Resurrection chapter, and it's a wonderful chapter to just relish and enjoy because Paul deals with the resurrection, and he deals with it not only in a way that is powerful spiritually, but that is also powerful logically. In fact, I still remember reading in a logic textbook, or I should say a textbook about how to write, that this chapter 15 of 1 Corinthians was presented as an example of how to present an argument. So take that for what it's worth. Then on day 2, we get to head into 2 Corinthians chapters 1 through 5. And in these chapters, you'll want to notice how as Paul addresses a couple of different matters, he brings forgiveness and the ministry of forgiveness into sharp focus. He really puts the spotlight on those two things. And so too in today's church, those two matters, forgiveness and the message, the ministry of forgiveness, ought to have central place in God's kingdom. Then on day 3 and day 4, we get 2 Corinthians chapters 6 through 10, and also chapters 11 through 13. And the reason why I've lumped these 2 days together is because in these chapters of 2 Corinthians, Paul really gets into, in a big way, a defense of his ministry. It was there in the first couple of chapters, but here he really kind of kicks it into high gear. And I want to point out that Paul didn't defend his ministry because of some kind of selfish reason. It wasn't like he was trying to build himself up or make himself look good. The reason why he was defending his ministry to the Corinthian Christians is because he wanted to call them back from throwing away the gospel message that he had shared with them, that they were kind of on the verge of almost doing because of some false teachers who had come in and attacked Paul's ministry and said he really isn't the kind of guy you should listen to. And so Paul is forced to defend the ministry, not for his own sake, but for the sake of the souls of those Corinthians. On day 5, we head into the book of Galatians with the first 4 chapters. And in those first 4 chapters of Galatians, like I said, you're going to notice a little bit of a different tone here. We've seen Paul be a little bit sharp at times in some of his other letters. However, in Galatians, it just is a lot more intense because it comes up more often. Paul kicks off right in the first couple of verses about talking about anybody who comes and doesn't preach the gospel of Jesus, that person should be condemned. And then as he moves later into the letter, he talks about these Galatians being foolish. He questions them about why are they falling away from the gospel message for something that's not really a gospel at all. And later on, in fact, in chapter 5, we're going to hear him talking about people going all the way and emasculating themselves. And so it's really a big intensity there, and it's all because Paul is defending the biblical teaching that people are saved by faith alone without any works. Then on day 6, as we get the last 2 chapters of the book of Galatians and then head into Ephesians, with those last 2 chapters, you're going to see Paul really pull out all the stops and present the fact that if you add any kind of work to what Jesus has done, you destroy and nullify the freedom that we have in Christ Jesus. And then as we head into the book of Ephesians with the first 2 chapters on day 6, you're going to start to notice that theme of unity coming on pretty strong. Paul starts with talking about the unity we have in the one calling of election that God has given to us. Then he talks about the unity we have through the one work of Jesus that has saved us by faith alone, and how in Christ Jesus, God has united both Jews and Gentiles into one Christian church to exist in harmony and unity with one another. And then finally on day 7, as we get the remaining part of the book of Ephesians, chapters 3 through 6, you're going to see Paul transition from talking about the unity won for us by Christ and given to us through the message of the gospel to the exercise and the demonstration of that unity in the life of the Christian church. How Christians show that unity by carrying out the callings God has given to them. And we'll notice that some of those callings are the same, like in the second half of chapter 4 and the early part of chapter 5. We see how Christians in a lot of matters of morality express their unity by being one in showing things like forgiveness, avoiding sexual immorality, the way they talk to each other and are willing to forgive each other. That unity, though, also comes out in some very different callings that believers share. And we see that in the end of chapter 5 and into chapter 6, where Paul talks about how husbands and wives express their unity by exercising different callings, or how parents and children who are Christians show their unity by following different callings, or how masters and slaves exercise their unity as Christians by following different callings. And so keep that all in mind and watch for it as you read through that second half of the book of Ephesians. Well, that's all for this week. We'll see you next week.